What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2018 Volvo XC90. Today on the XC90, we're going to be covering how to do an ignition service. This will be applicable to both your T5 and T6 models. In front of us, we have one of our OE kits, which includes Delphi ignition coils, along with some genuine Volvo spark plugs. However, we do have the Denso spark plugs available as well, all available on fcpo.com. We recommend that you do this service every 60,000 miles for the spark plugs, and ignition coils will typically last a bit longer, about 100,000 miles or so. However, if one of them does fail, that will be followed with a check engine light and a code telling you that they have failed, as well as a misfire. As these spark plugs age and get older, your fuel economy can drop, and in extreme cases, you will develop a misfire or a stutter in the engine if either the plugs or the coils have gone bad. So definitely many ways to tell, and scan the car to see if you have that issue. But before we get into this DIY, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this job. For this job, you're going to need a ratchet and a torque wrench that's capable of doing 17 Newton meters, an extension. We also have a T40, an 8mm socket, and a 14mm spark plug socket. This is a Beru 12-point, which we'll link in the description below. It's magnetic. If you don't have a magnetic socket like this, just have a magnet tool handy so you can pull your spark plugs out, or a small piece of fuel line hose. Now with that, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. All right, my good people, we are under the hood of the XC90. To get started, we're going to remove our insulation cover, which is held in by 4 T40 little plastic Torx. They should be loose enough where you can just get them by hand, but if you have a T40 bit, it doesn't hurt to stick it in there and just rotate it until you unscrew them out. So we'll do that to all 4 and then pull the cover off. You don't have to remove the oil cap to do this. You can leave that on. All right, with all 4 of those undone, we can pull this cover off and just set it to the side. And now with that off, we have access to all 4 of our ignition coils and the electrical connector going to them. So first things first is going to be to disconnect them. There's a small tab, pretty standard on the connector. You just push in the tab and then pull back and release. You can see the little tab right there. And just tuck that cable out of the way. Then the ignition coil is held in by 1 8mm bolt. We'll go ahead and remove that now. And pull that bolt out. Now we can fish the coil out. Here's our old ignition coil. It's important to look at the boot, see if there's any oil on it. If there is, then that's usually an indicator that your valve cover gasket is failing. This one looks nice and dry. We're going to go ahead and replace it anyways, just for sake of this DIY. With that out, we can now work on removing our spark plug. We have our 14mm socket. We're just going to feed it down into the spark plug tube. It's at a bit of an angle. Then we can go ahead and take our ratchet. All right, here's our old plug. This car does have 57,000 miles on it, so it was nearing the interval of 60K. So perfect timing to get it off. And now we're simply going to go ahead and take our new spark plug. We'll feed it into our magnetic socket. Again, if you don't have a magnetic socket, you can feed them in gently with a magnet or a small piece of fuel line hose. Make sure you start them by hand always. Doesn't hurt to get the spark plug seated and back up the socket a bit as if you were going to remove it, and then get it started by hand. That way you avoid any chances at cross-threading them. And then we're just going to go ahead and snug the spark plug all the way down, and then we're going to torque it to 17 Newton meters. That is nice and snug. It just got seated. We're going to set our torque wrench to 17 Newton meters. All right, nice and snug. And now we can take our new ignition coil. The kit does include a little bit of dielectric grease. Whenever you're working with a bolted down coil, I say it's okay to use them. I'm not a huge fan of using the grease on a press fit coil. Usually it causes them to slip off. So we can do a very small dab. That's all we need. Feed our coil into place. All right, you're going to kind of feel it situate itself onto the spark plug. Go ahead and start your bolts by hand. Again, this is an 8mm bolt. We're just going to go ahead and snug it down, but for those of you following along at home, if you want to torque it down, it's going to be about 10 Newton meters for those. Nice and snug. Don't forget to plug it back in. And with that, we're just going to go ahead and repeat the process across the other three, and then we'll pick it back up in just a moment. For this last ignition coil and spark plug, you need to remove this breather hose or this PCV line that goes to the oil trap up here. Simply pull the hose back and tuck it over to the side, and then you can continue on with the removal of the coil and plug. All right, our last coil, we can plug in our electrical connector once more. Don't forget your line. With that last coil done and our line back on, we can reinstall our insulation cover here. Place that over. Then you can just push these T40s down, the little plastic screws. And that's going to conclude this DIY for today, my good people. Overall, a really easy and straightforward job on the XC90. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. Or if you want to see us do a specific DIY on this chassis, I'm all ears. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.